The advertisement in the Boston Herald had promised nothing except a roof and 3 meals a day, and Rose Dalton figured that was 2 meals more than she currently had. She folded the newspaper with trembling fingers, her stomach growling loud enough that the other women in the boarding house common room glanced her way with expressions ranging from pity to disgust. At 22 years old, Rose had learned that warmth was something other people experienced, the kind that came from full bellies and soft beds and voices that spoke without cruelty. She had never known such things, not in the orphanage where she had spent her childhood, not in the succession of households where she had worked as a servant, and certainly not in the cramped boarding house where she now struggled to pay rent by taking in mending until her fingers bled. The cowboy who had placed the advertisement was named Samuel Dawson, and he lived in Enid, Oklahoma Territory. The letter she composed in response was brief because she had little to say about herself that would recommend her. She could cook basic meals, she could clean, she could read and write thanks to a kind teacher at the orphanage who had stayed late on winter evenings to teach the children their letters. She did not mention that she flinched at loud noises, or that she had never received a gentle touch in her entire life, or that the very concept of home was as foreign to her as the distant territories she read about in discarded newspapers. Samuel's response arrived 3 weeks later with a train ticket and a brief note written in surprisingly neat handwriting. He would meet her at the station in Enid on the 15th of September, 1893. He asked only that she come with an open mind and a willingness to build something new. Rose read the letter 17 times, searching for cruelty between the lines, some hint of the harsh treatment she had come to expect from life. She found none, but experience had taught her that kindness was often a mask worn by those with the worst intentions. She boarded the train with everything she owned in a single carpet bag that had been left behind by a previous tenant at the boarding house. The journey west was long and uncomfortable, but Rose barely noticed the hard seats or the coal smoke that drifted through the windows. She watched the landscape change from the crowded buildings of Boston to rolling farmland to the vast prairies that seemed to stretch forever beneath an enormous sky. She had never seen so much open space, had never imagined that the world could be so big. The other passengers chatted and shared food, but Rose kept to herself as she always did, her hands folded in her lap and her eyes focused on the horizon. Enid was barely a town when the train pulled into the station on a golden September afternoon. The land run of 1893 had happened just months before, and the settlement still had that raw, unfinished quality of a place being born. Wooden buildings lined a single main street, and everywhere Rose looked, people were hammering and sawing and hauling lumber. The air smelled of fresh cut wood and prairie grass and possibility. She stepped onto the platform with her carpet bag clutched in both hands, scanning the crowd for a man she would recognize only from his description. Tall, brown hair, usually wearing a tan hat. There were a dozen men who fit that description, and Rose felt panic rising in her chest as she stood there alone, buffeted by passengers hurrying past her. Then a voice spoke from behind her, low and careful, as though the speaker was worried about startling a skittish horse. "Miss Dalton?" Rose turned to find a man standing a respectful distance away, his tan hat in his hands. He was indeed tall, probably 6 feet or more, with broad shoulders and sun-bronzed skin that spoke of years working outdoors. His hair was a deep brown, slightly too long, and his eyes were a startling shade of blue-green that reminded Rose of pictures she had seen of the ocean. He was younger than she had expected, perhaps 28 or 29, and there was something tentative in his expression, as though he was just as nervous as she was. "I am Rose Dalton," she said quietly, and was frustrated when her voice came out barely above a whisper. Samuel Dawson smiled, and it transformed his entire face. "I am real glad you came. The journey must have been long. Are you hungry? Thirsty? There is a restaurant just down the street, nothing fancy, but the food is decent." Rose was starving, as she had eaten nothing but the small portion of bread and cheese she had packed 2 days ago, but old habits died hard. "I am fine, thank you." Samuel studied her for a long moment, and Rose had the uncomfortable sensation that he could see right through her polite lie. But he did not push, just nodded and gestured toward the street. My wagon is this way. The homestead is about 4 miles outside of town. I hope you do not mind the ride. The wagon was sturdy and well maintained, pulled by two horses that Samuel clearly cared for based on the way he greeted them and checked their harnesses. He helped Rose up onto the seat with a gentle hand under her elbow, and she went rigid at the contact, unable to help herself. Samuel withdrew immediately, a small frown creasing his brow, but he said nothing as he climbed up beside her and took the reins. They rode in silence for the first mile, and Rose used the time to study her new husband without appearing to stare. His hands on the reins were scarred and calloused, the hands of a man who worked hard, but there was a gentleness in the way he handled the horses that eased something tight in Rose's chest. He had rolled his sleeves to his elbows, revealing forearms corded with muscle, and Rose found herself wondering what it would be like to be held by such strong arms. The thought made her face heat, and she quickly looked away. I should tell you about the place, Samuel said finally, breaking the silence. I claimed the land during the run. It is a good quarter section, 160 acres, with a creek running through the eastern edge. I have been working on the house since April. It is not much yet, just 3 rooms, but it is solid and it has a good roof. I am planning to add on next spring, maybe another bedroom and a proper parlor. Rose nodded, unsure what to say. She had never owned anything in her life, had never even imagined owning land. The concept was almost too big to grasp. I run cattle, Samuel continued, and there was enthusiasm in his voice now. Just a small herd right now, maybe 40 head, but I am building it up. The grazing is good here, and there is a growing market for beef. I have also been breaking a few horses on the side. There is always someone who needs a good saddle horse. He glanced at her, and that tentative expression was back. I am not a rich man, Rose. I cannot promise you luxury or an easy life, but I work hard, and I will provide for you. You will not go hungry or cold, not while I have breath in my body. The words should have sounded like empty promises, the kind Rose had heard too many times before. But there was something in Samuel's voice, a quiet intensity that made her believe him. She swallowed hard, her throat tight with emotions she could not name. That is more than I have ever had, she said softly, and it was perhaps the most honest thing she had ever told anyone. Samuel's hands tightened on the reins, and he was quiet for a long moment. When he spoke again, his voice was rough. I read between the lines of your letter. You have had a hard time of it. It was not a question, so Rose did not answer. She watched the prairie roll past, golden grass rippling in the wind like waves on that ocean she had never seen. I want you to know something, Samuel said. I am not a perfect man. I have a temper sometimes, though I have never raised my hand to another person except in defense. I can be stubborn and I get focused on my work and forget to come in for meals, but I will never hurt you, Rose. Not with my hands and not with my words. That is a promise I make to you right now before we even reach the house. Rose felt something crack inside her chest, some wall she had built to keep the world at bay. She blinked hard against the sudden sting of tears, determined not to cry in front of this stranger who was now her husband. They had been married by proxy, the paperwork signed and witnessed before she left Boston, but it felt surreal, like something happening to someone else. The house appeared on the horizon like a promise, small but sturdy against the vast expanse of prairie. It was built of lumber, not sod like many of the homesteads they had passed, and Rose could see the care that had gone into its construction. The roof was neatly shingled, the windows were actual glass, and there was a small porch across the front with 2 rocking chairs sitting side by side. Behind the house stood a barn and a corral where several horses watched their approach with pricked ears. Samuel helped her down from the wagon, and this time Rose was prepared for the touch and managed not to flinch. He carried her carpet bag to the porch and opened the door, then stepped back. Welcome home, Rose. Home. The word echoed in her mind as she crossed the threshold. The interior was simple but clean, with a main room that served as kitchen and living area, a small bedroom visible through an open door, and what appeared to be another room or perhaps a storage area on the other side. There was a cook stove in the corner, a rough-hewn table with two chairs, a rocking chair near a small fireplace, and shelves lined with dishes and supplies. The floor was swept, and everything was neat and orderly in a way that suggested Samuel had spent considerable time preparing for her arrival. "The bedroom is yours," Samuel said from behind her. "I will sleep out here on a pallet. I figured you would want your privacy, at least until we get to know each other better." Rose turned to stare at him, shock rendering her speechless. In all her imaginings of what this arrangement would be like, she had never considered that he might offer her privacy, her own space. Most men would have expected immediate consummation of the marriage, would have considered it their right. Samuel's ears turned red under her scrutiny. "I know we are married, legal and all, but it does not feel right rushing things. I figured we could take our time, get to know each other. There is no hurry." He cleared his throat, looking uncomfortable. "I will bring in your bag." He escaped outside before Rose could formulate a response, and she stood alone in the center of the room, her heart pounding. Slowly, carefully, she explored her new home. The bedroom was small but contained a real bed with a straw tick mattress, a quilt that looked handmade, a chest of drawers, and a small mirror on the wall. There was even a pitcher and basin for washing. Rose sat on the edge of the bed and pressed her hand against the quilt, feeling the neat stitches beneath her palm. Whoever had made this had taken time and care with their work. When Samuel returned with her carpet bag, Rose was standing in the main room trying to compose herself. "Did you make the quilt?" she asked. He shook his head, setting the bag just inside the bedroom door. "My neighbor, Mrs. Patterson, made it. She is a kind woman, lives about 2 miles north with her husband and 4 children. When I told her I was bringing home a bride, she insisted on making it as a wedding gift." "That was kind of her." Rose hesitated, then forced herself to continue. "I should start supper. If you tell me what supplies you have, I can make something." Samuel's face brightened. "You do not have to cook tonight. You just got here, and I am sure you are exhausted." "I was planning to make something simple, maybe beans and cornbread." "I would like to cook," Rose said, and realized it was true. Cooking was something she knew how to do, something that would make her feel useful rather than a burden. "Please, I want to." Something shifted in Samuel's expression, a softening around his eyes. "All right then, let me show you where everything is." They worked together in the small kitchen space, and Rose found herself relaxing incrementally as Samuel showed her the supplies he had laid in. There were sacks of flour and cornmeal, dried beans, salt pork, coffee, sugar, and even some precious cinnamon. He had a small stock of vegetables from a garden he had planted: potatoes, onions, and carrots. Rose decided on a simple stew, something hearty that would stick to the ribs, and as she chopped vegetables and browned the salt pork, she felt Samuel's eyes on her. "You move like you know what you are doing in a kitchen," he observed. "I worked as a cook and housekeeper for several families in Boston," Rose said, keeping her eyes on her work. "I am not fancy, but I can make food that fills you up." "That is all I need." Samuel busied himself bringing in firewood and filling the water barrel from the well outside, but he kept circling back to the kitchen area, watching her work with undisguised interest. "I am not much of a cook myself. I can manage not to starve, but everything I make tastes about the same." Rose felt the corner of her mouth twitch in what might have been the beginning of a smile. "Everything tastes the same? Like sadness and burnt flour," Samuel said solemnly, and Rose shocked herself by laughing. It was a rusty sound, unpracticed, and it died quickly, but Samuel's face lit up like she had given him a precious gift. They ate at the small table as the sun set beyond the windows, painting the prairie in shades of gold and crimson. The stew was good, if Rose did say so herself, and Samuel ate with the focused intensity of a man who had been surviving on his own cooking for too long. He praised the meal 3 separate times until Rose's cheeks felt hot and she had to tell him to stop. After supper, Samuel washed the dishes over Rose's protests, insisting that she should rest. She sat in the rocking chair, watching him work, and felt that strange, cracking sensation in her chest again. The house was warm from the cook stove, and the lamplight cast soft shadows on the walls, and for the first time in her life, Rose felt something that might have been safety. That night, true to his word, Samuel made up a pallet on the floor near the fireplace while Rose retreated to the bedroom. She lay in the real bed with the handmade quilt pulled up to her chin, listening to him move around in the other room, and she waited for the fear to come. But there was only the sound of prairie wind outside the windows and the soft breathing of her husband from the other room, and eventually, impossibly, she slept. The days fell into a rhythm that was both strange and comforting. Rose woke early each morning to find that Samuel had already been up for hours, doing the morning chores. She would cook breakfast, usually eggs from the chickens Samuel kept, and biscuits or flapjacks, and they would eat together as the sun rose. Samuel would tell her his plans for the day, and Rose would nod and listen, learning about cattle and horses and the endless work of maintaining a homestead. After breakfast, Samuel would head outside, and Rose would clean the house and prepare the midday meal. The housework never took as long as she expected because the house was small and Samuel was naturally neat, so she began to expand her territory. She organized the shelves, washed all the linens, scrubbed the floor until it gleamed. She took stock of the supplies and made lists of things they would need. She examined the garden and began pulling weeds, even though the growing season was nearly over. Samuel would come in for the noon meal, usually with some story about the cattle or the horses or something he had seen on the prairie. He talked more than anyone Rose had ever known, a steady stream of words that should have been overwhelming, but somehow was not. He seemed to understand that she was not used to conversation, that words did not come easily to her, so he filled the silences without expecting her to do the same. In the evenings, after supper, they would sit together in the main room. Samuel would work on tack repairs or whittle, and Rose would mend clothes or knit. She had found yarn in the storage room, and when she asked about it, Samuel admitted that he had bought it in town, thinking she might like to have something to do with her hands. The thoughtfulness of the gesture had made her throat tight. 3 weeks after Rose's arrival, the first cold snap hit, and she woke to frost on the windows and a chill in the air that seeped through the walls. She dressed quickly and emerged from the bedroom to find Samuel crouched in front of the fireplace, building up the fire. He glanced over his shoulder and frowned. "I need to improve the insulation before winter really sets in. The walls are not chinked as well as they should be, and that bedroom gets cold." He stood, brushing off his hands. "I am thinking I will move some supplies around in the storage room and set up a sleeping area for you in there. It is smaller, so it will stay warmer, and it is right next to the fireplace." Rose shook her head. "You should take that room. You work outside all day in the cold. You need the warmth more than I do." Samuel's jaw set in a stubborn line. "You are my wife, Rose. I am not going to have you freezing while I sleep warm." "Then we are at an impasse," Rose said quietly, "because I am not going to take the warm room while you sleep out here." They stared at each other across the room, and Rose saw the moment the solution occurred to Samuel. His ears turned red, and he looked away. "There is another option. The bedroom is big enough for both of us if I brought in another pallet. We could put up a curtain down the middle, give you privacy. That way the room stays warmer with 2 people in it, and neither of us freezes." Rose's heart hammered in her chest. The thought of sharing a room with Samuel, of sleeping in the same space where she could hear him breathe and move, was terrifying. But she was also practical enough to know that an Oklahoma winter could be brutal, and freezing to death because of propriety seemed foolish. "All right," she said finally, "but I want the curtain." Samuel nodded, relief crossing his face. I will set it up today. The new arrangement took some getting used to. Samuel strung a rope across the center of the room and hung a heavy blanket over it, creating two separate spaces. He set up his pallet on one side, and Rose's bed remained on the other, and they worked out an awkward system of announcing when they were changing clothes or needed privacy. But Samuel had been right about the warmth. With two people in the space, and the fireplace on the other side of the wall, the bedroom stayed much warmer than it had when Rose slept alone. She found herself lying awake those first few nights, hyper aware of Samuel's presence on the other side of the curtain. But as the days passed and he continued to be nothing but respectful and kind, the tension began to ease. Sometimes they would talk in the darkness, sharing small details about their lives. Samuel told her about growing up on a farm in Missouri, about losing his parents to influenza when he was 18, about deciding to head west to make his own way. Rose, more haltingly, told him about the orphanage, about the families she had worked for, about the constant struggle to survive in a world that had little use for a woman alone. "You are not alone anymore," Samuel said one night, his voice soft through the curtain. "You have me now, Rose, for whatever that is worth." "It is worth more than you know," Rose whispered back, and she heard him shift on his pallet, heard the catch in his breathing that suggested her words had affected him. October brought cooler temperatures and the hard work of preparing for winter. Samuel spent long days reinforcing the barn, laying in hay for the cattle, and butchering one of the steers for meat. Rose helped where she could, and she found herself growing stronger, her hands becoming rough and capable. She learned to milk the cows Samuel acquired from a neighbor, learned to collect eggs without frightening the chickens, learned to read the sky for signs of coming weather. They made a trip into Enid for supplies, and Rose experienced the odd sensation of being introduced as Samuel's wife. The townspeople were friendly, if curious about the quiet woman who had come from back east. Mrs. Patterson, the neighbor who had made the quilt, insisted they come for Sunday dinner, and Rose found herself seated at a crowded table surrounded by children and warmth and laughter. She was overwhelmed by the noise and chaos at first, but Mrs. Patterson seemed to understand, drawing her aside to see the chickens and giving her a moment to breathe. "Samuel is a good man," Mrs. Patterson said as they scattered feed for the birds. "He has been working himself half to death to get that homestead ready. I am glad he has someone now, someone to share the burden and the joy." Rose nodded, not trusting her voice. She was beginning to understand that Samuel was indeed a good man, perhaps the best she had ever known. He was patient with her silences, gentle with her fears, and unfailingly kind, even when he was exhausted from a long day of work. And more troubling, she was beginning to feel things when she looked at him, warm, fluttery things that pooled in her stomach and made her heart race. November arrived with gray skies and biting wind, and Rose realized with a start that she had been in Oklahoma for 2 months. The homestead felt familiar now, the rhythms of daily life as natural as breathing. She knew where Samuel kept his tools, knew which horse would come to her hand and which ones were still skittish, knew the sound of his boots on the porch and could judge his mood by the way he took off his hat. She was making bread one afternoon when Samuel came in early, his face concerned. "There is a storm coming, a big one, judging by the sky. I am going to make sure everything is secured and bring the cattle in closer to the barn. Can you fill every pot and bucket we have with water from the well? If the storm is as bad as I think, we might not be able to get outside for a day or two." Rose immediately set aside the bread and began hauling water. She filled the barrel in the house, then every pot, bucket, and container she could find. Samuel worked outside, and she could hear him hammering and calling to the animals. By the time he came back in, the wind was howling and the temperature had dropped dramatically. "I think we are in for a blizzard," Samuel said, brushing snow from his shoulders. The first flakes had just started to fall, small and hard as rice. "I have dealt with winter storms in Missouri, but I hear they can be fierce out here on the prairie." He was right. By nightfall, the snow was falling so thick and fast that Rose could not see the barn from the window. The wind shrieked around the house, finding every crack and gap, and despite the fire roaring in the fireplace, cold seeped in. They ate a quick supper. Then Samuel banked the fire and suggested they retreat to the bedroom, where it would be easier to stay warm. The storm raged for 3 days. Samuel had been right about not being able to go outside. When he tried to check on the animals the first morning, the door was blocked by a drift taller than he was, and the wind was so strong it nearly knocked him down. He managed to fight his way to the barn and back, returning with frost in his eyebrows, and his lips blue with cold, and Rose had scolded him and made him sit by the fire with a blanket and hot coffee until he stopped shivering. They were trapped inside together, and Rose discovered a new intimacy in the forced closeness. They played cards, games Samuel taught her with worn decks he kept in his trunk. They talked more than they ever had, long rambling conversations about everything and nothing. Samuel told her about his dreams for the ranch, about the house he wanted to build, about children running through rooms that did not exist yet. Rose, emboldened by the darkness and the storm, told him things she had never told anyone, about the cruelties of the orphanage, about the man who had tried to force himself on her when she was 16 and working as a maid, about the gnawing fear that had been her constant companion for as long as she could remember. Samuel listened to all of it, his face growing darker as she spoke. When she finished, he was quiet for a long moment, then he reached across the space between them and took her hand. It was the first time he had initiated touch beyond helping her on or off the wagon, and Rose went very still. "I am sorry," Samuel said roughly. "I am sorry that life has been so hard on you. I am sorry that people hurt you. I am sorry that you had to be afraid for so long." His hand tightened on hers. "But you are safe now, Rose. I swear to you, you are safe here with me." Rose looked down at their joined hands, his so much larger than hers, calloused and scarred from work, but so incredibly gentle. Something shifted inside her, something fundamental, and she realized with a jolt that ran through her entire body that she trusted him. Somewhere in the past 2 months, without her quite realizing it, Samuel had slipped past all her defenses and made a home in her heart. "I know," she whispered, and when she looked up, his eyes were bright with emotion in the lamplight. The storm finally broke on the 4th day, and they emerged into a world transformed by snow. It was beautiful and treacherous, with drifts as tall as the fences and icicles hanging from the eaves like crystal daggers. Samuel had to dig paths to the barn and the well, backbreaking work that left him exhausted. But the animals had survived, huddled together in the barn, and the house had held firm against the wind. In the aftermath of the storm, something had changed between them. Samuel still slept on his pallet on his side of the curtain, but now they would reach for each other in the darkness, hands finding hands, fingers entwining. They sat closer during meals, shoulders touching, and Rose found herself looking for excuses to be near him. When he came in from the cold, she would help him out of his coat, her hands lingering on his shoulders. When she cooked, he would stand beside her, ostensibly to help, but really just to be close. December brought more snow and bitter cold, but it also brought a new warmth inside the little house. Samuel began courting her in earnest, as though they had not already been married for 3 months. He brought her small gifts: a pretty stone he found by the creek, a bird's nest he thought she would find interesting, a length of ribbon from the general store in town. He complimented her cooking, her cleaning, the way she handled the animals. He made her laugh with stories and observations, and he listened when she talked, as though every word she spoke was precious. For her part, Rose began to open like a flower in the sun. She smiled more, laughed more, talked more. She began to sing while she worked, soft songs she remembered from childhood. She made special efforts with meals, trying new recipes, making desserts with their precious sugar. She mended Samuel's clothes with tiny, careful stitches, and she began work on a new shirt for him, cutting the fabric carefully and sewing by lamplight. Christmas came, and they celebrated quietly, just the two of them. Samuel had bought Rose a warm cloak in town, a beautiful dark blue wool that made her gasp when she unwrapped it. She gave him the shirt she had made, and the look on his face when he held it up made her feel like she had given him something priceless. They had a special dinner, roast chicken and potatoes, and a dried apple pie that Rose had made, and afterward they sat together by the fire. Samuel in the rocking chair, and Rose on a cushion at his feet, her head resting against his knee. "This is the best Christmas I have ever had," Samuel said softly, his hand coming to rest on her hair, stroking gently. "Having you here, Rose, it makes everything better. The house, the land, my life, it all matters more with you in it." Rose turned to look up at him, and the expression on his face made her breath catch. He was looking at her like she hung the moon, like she was something precious and rare. Without thinking, without questioning, she rose to her knees and reached for him. Samuel met her halfway, his hands cupping her face, and then they were kissing, soft and sweet and full of wonder. It was Rose's first kiss, and it was everything she had never let herself dream about. Samuel's lips were gentle on hers, asking rather than demanding, and when she made a small sound of pleasure, his arms came around her, pulling her close. They kissed until they were both breathless, until Rose was halfway in Samuel's lap and his heart was pounding against hers. "Rose," he breathed against her lips, and her name sounded like a prayer. "I love you. I have been falling in love with you since the moment you stepped off that train, and I love you more with every day that passes." "I love you too," Rose said, and the words came easily, naturally because they were true. She loved this man who had given her safety and warmth and kindness, who had taken her broken pieces and treated them like they were worth something. "I love you, Samuel." They moved the curtain that night, taking it down with trembling hands and careful smiles. Samuel was patient and gentle, taking his time, making sure Rose felt safe and cherished. They learned each other in the darkness, and when Rose cried, Samuel kissed away her tears and told her she was beautiful. She was perfect. She was his. Afterward, they lay tangled together in the narrow bed, and Rose felt a peace she had never known. Samuel's arms were strong around her, his heartbeat steady under her ear, and she thought that this must be what home felt like. Not a place, but a person. Not walls and a roof, but warmth and safety and love. January and February were hard months, with storms that kept them inside and cold that made even the warmest clothes feel inadequate. But inside the little house, Rose and Samuel created their own summer. They talked and laughed and made love, learning each other's bodies and hearts with equal dedication. Samuel told Rose she was beautiful at least once a day, and Rose would blush and smile and kiss him to make him stop talking. They made plans for the spring, a bigger garden, more chickens, perhaps a pig or two. Samuel wanted to expand the herd, and Rose suggested they might try raising some horses to sell. They talked about the addition to the house, and Samuel promised her a real parlor and maybe even a second bedroom. "For when the children come," he said, and Rose's hand went instinctively to her stomach, wondering. March arrived with the first hints of warmth, and the prairie began to wake from its winter sleep. Rose realized with a start that her courses were late, and when another week passed with no sign of them, she began to suspect. She said nothing to Samuel, not wanting to raise his hopes until she was certain, but she caught him watching her with a speculative expression more than once. It was Mrs. Patterson who confirmed it when they visited in early April. The older woman took one look at Rose and pulled her aside with a knowing smile. "How far along are you, dear?" Rose's hand flew to her stomach. "How did you know?" "You have that look," Mrs. Patterson said kindly. "I have had 4 children of my own. I recognize it. Have you told Samuel?" Rose shook her head. "I was not sure. I did not want to say anything until I knew." "You are sure now," Mrs. Patterson said confidently. "I would guess you are about 3 months along. That means a baby in the fall." Probably October. Rose's eyes filled with tears, and Mrs. Patterson hugged her. Happy tears, I hope. The happiest, Rose whispered. She told Samuel that evening, catching his hands and placing them on her stomach. We are going to have a baby. In October. Samuel's face went through a series of expressions: shock, joy, wonder, and then a fierce protectiveness that made Rose's heart clench. He dropped to his knees in front of her, his arms going around her waist, his face pressed against her stomach. A baby. Our baby. Rose, you have made me the happiest man alive. He was impossibly tender with her after that, treating her like she was made of glass. He would not let her lift anything heavy, worried when she worked too hard, and fussed over her meals until Rose had to remind him that women had been having babies since the beginning of time. But she secretly loved his attention, loved the way he would rest his hand on her growing stomach and talk to the baby, telling their child stories about the ranch and the horses and the life they were building together. Spring turned to summer, and Rose bloomed along with the prairie. Her body changed, growing round and full, and Samuel told her she was more beautiful than ever. They worked together to prepare for the baby, setting up a cradle in the corner of the bedroom, making tiny clothes from soft fabrics Samuel bought in town. Rose felt a peace and contentment she had never imagined possible, and she thanked God every day for the advertisement in the newspaper, for the train ticket, for the courage to take a chance on something unknown. The summer was hot, and Rose felt every degree of it, but Samuel did everything he could to make her comfortable. He brought her cool water from the well, fanned her when she sat in the rocking chair, and took over more of the household chores, despite her protests. The cattle were doing well. The garden was producing abundantly, and Samuel had sold 3 horses for a good price. They were not rich, but they were comfortable, and more importantly, they were happy. August brought news that shook the peaceful rhythm of their lives. A group of outlaws had been terrorizing homesteads to the west, stealing cattle and supplies. Samuel immediately became more vigilant, keeping his rifle close and checking the property regularly. Rose tried not to worry, but she could see the tension in Samuel's shoulders, the way his eyes constantly scanned the horizon. The outlaws came on a hot afternoon in late August. Rose was in the garden picking vegetables, her back aching from the weight of the baby, when she heard the sound of horses approaching fast. She straightened, shading her eyes, and her heart sank when she saw 3 rough-looking men riding hard toward the house. Samuel was out checking the far pasture, too far away to help. The men reined in their horses, looking down at her with expressions that made Rose's blood run cold. She recognized that look, had seen it before on the faces of men who thought a woman alone was easy prey. "Well now, what have we here?" the leader said, a greasy-haired man with a scar across his cheek. "Where is your man, sweetheart?" "He will be back any moment," Rose said, proud that her voice did not shake. "You should leave before he gets here." The men laughed, and the leader swung down from his horse. "I think we have time to take what we want. You have a nice little place here. Shame to let all these supplies go to waste." He started toward the house, and Rose knew with terrible clarity that if she let him get inside, she and the baby would be in grave danger. Old instincts rose up, the survival skills she had learned in a hard life, and she made a decision. She slipped her hand into her apron pocket, where she kept the small knife she used for gardening, and when the man reached for the door, she stepped forward. "I said leave," she said clearly, bringing the knife up. It was not much of a weapon, but it was sharp, and she knew how to use it. "Get off our land." The man's eyes widened in surprise, then narrowed dangerously. "You have got spirit. I like that in a woman." He took a step toward her, and Rose backed up, her hand tightening on the knife. Then a rifle shot cracked across the prairie, and dust kicked up near the outlaw's feet. Everyone froze, and Rose's heart soared as she saw Samuel riding hard toward them, his rifle raised. He fired again, this time closer, and the outlaws scrambled for their horses. "Get off my land," Samuel roared. and there was such fury in his voice that even the scarred leader hesitated. "If I see any of you near my wife again, I will not aim at the ground." The outlaws rode off, shouting threats over their shoulders, but Rose could see they were more interested in escape than confrontation. Samuel was off his horse before it fully stopped, running to Rose and pulling her into his arms. He was shaking, and Rose realized he had been terrified. "Are you all right? Did they hurt you? The baby?" His hands were everywhere, checking her over, and Rose caught them in hers. "We are fine. They did not touch me. You came in time." Samuel pulled her close again, burying his face in her hair. "When I saw them riding toward the house, when I realized I was too far away to stop them, I have never been so scared in my life. If anything had happened to you, to our baby." His voice broke, and Rose held him, comforting him even though she was the one who had been threatened. That night, Samuel barely slept, getting up every few hours to check the windows and doors. Rose finally pulled him back to bed and made him lie down, curling against him and holding him until his breathing evened out. The next morning, he rode into town and returned with two other ranchers, men he knew and trusted. They organized a patrol system, taking turns watching for the outlaws, and word was sent to the nearest marshal's office. The outlaws were caught 2 weeks later, trying to cross into Kansas with stolen cattle. Samuel came home with the news and swept Rose into his arms, spinning her carefully despite her protests about the baby. "It is over. They are in custody, and they will hang for what they have done. We are safe, Rose. Our family is safe." September arrived, and Rose felt like a ship in full sail, enormous and ungainly. The baby was active, kicking and rolling, and Samuel would spend hours with his hand on her stomach, marveling at every movement. He finished the addition to the house just in time, giving them a new parlor and a second bedroom, and Rose arranged the space with the furniture Samuel built and the curtains she had sewn. October came with cooler temperatures and beautiful autumn colors, and Rose felt the first pains on a golden afternoon as she was making bread. Samuel was in the barn, and she sent one of the ranch hands who had come to help with the cattle drive to fetch Mrs. Patterson. By the time the older woman arrived, Rose's pains were coming regularly, and Samuel was pacing the floor like a caged animal. Mrs. Patterson shooed him out of the bedroom and got to work. The labor was long and hard, lasting through the night and into the next morning. Rose had never experienced such pain, but every time she thought she could not go on, she would hear Samuel's voice through the door, encouraging her, telling her she was strong. She could do this. He loved her. And somehow, she found the strength to keep going. The baby was born just after dawn, and the sound of crying filled the little house. Mrs. Patterson cleaned the baby and wrapped it in a soft blanket, then placed the bundle in Rose's arms. "You have a son, Rose, a beautiful, healthy son." Rose looked down at the tiny face, the perfect features, the shock of dark hair, and fell completely in love. Samuel was allowed in then, and he came to the bedside, his face awestruck, his eyes wet with tears. He touched the baby's cheek with one careful finger, as though afraid he might break something so small and precious. "He is perfect," Samuel whispered. "Rose, he is absolutely perfect. Thank you. Thank you for this gift, for our son, for everything." They named him Simon Thomas Dawson, Simon for Samuel's father, and Thomas for the kind teacher at Rose's orphanage who had taught her to read. Simon was a good baby, healthy and strong, and Rose discovered a fierce maternal love she had not known existed. She would hold him for hours, marveling at his tiny hands and feet, breathing in his sweet baby smell. Samuel was a devoted father from the first moment, changing diapers without complaint, walking the floor with Simon when he fussed, singing lullabies in his deep voice. Rose would wake in the night to find him standing over the cradle, just watching their son sleep with an expression of such tender love that it made her heart ache. Winter came again, the second winter Rose had spent on the Oklahoma prairie, but this year was different. This year, the house was not just warm, it was filled with love and laughter and the sounds of a baby. Rose would nurse Simon in the rocking chair while Samuel worked on tack repairs, and they would talk about everything and nothing, content in their small family. Simon grew and thrived, rolling over, and then sitting up, and then crawling with determination across the floor. Samuel baby-proofed the house, blocking off the fireplace and making sure there was nothing dangerous within reach. He built a high chair and a playpen, and he carved wooden toys that Simon loved to chew on and throw. The ranch continued to prosper. Samuel's hard work and careful planning paid off, and they were able to buy more cattle and horses. They hired a hand to help with the work, a quiet young man named Jack, who lived in a small cabin Samuel built near the barn. Rose's garden expanded, and she began preserving food for the winter. Rows of jars filled with vegetables and fruits lined the shelves. When Simon was a year old, Rose realized she was pregnant again. Samuel was overjoyed, though he worried about her health after the difficulty of the first birth. But this pregnancy was easier, and Rose felt strong and capable. She managed the household and helped with the ranch work. Simon balanced on her hip or playing nearby. Their daughter was born in June of 1895, a beautiful baby with Rose's green eyes and Samuel's dark hair. They named her Sarah Marie, and Simon was fascinated by his new sister, always wanting to touch her and bring her toys. Samuel was just as devoted to Sarah as he was to Simon, cradling his tiny daughter and singing to her, telling her she was his princess. The years passed in a blur of work and love and family. The ranch grew and prospered, becoming one of the most successful in the area. Samuel built the big house he had promised, with a real parlor and dining room and 5 bedrooms, though Rose told him they did not need that many rooms. Samuel just smiled and said you never knew what the future might bring. Simon grew into a sturdy boy who loved the ranch and the animals, following his father everywhere and asking a million questions. Sarah was quieter, more thoughtful, but with a stubborn streak that kept Samuel on his toes. Rose watched her children grow and marveled that they were hers, that she had created this family with Samuel, that she had gone from a woman who had never known warmth to a mother with 2 beautiful children and a husband who loved her more every day. They had another son in 1897, whom they named Samuel Jr., but called Sam to avoid confusion. He was a happy baby, always smiling, and he brought even more joy to the household. Rose sometimes felt like her heart would burst with happiness, with the fullness of a life she had never imagined possible. Samuel still told her he loved her every single day, still looked at her like she was the most beautiful woman in the world, even after 3 children and years of hard work. He would steal kisses in the kitchen, come up behind her while she was cooking, and wrap his arms around her, whisper things in her ear that made her blush and laugh. They made time for each other. Precious moments alone when the children were asleep, and their love only deepened with the passing years. Rose thought often of the girl she had been when she stepped off the train in Enid, frightened and alone, expecting hardship and cruelty because that was all she had ever known. She had never imagined warmth, had never dared to dream of love. But Samuel had given her both, along with a home and a family, and a life filled with purpose and joy. One evening in the summer of 1899, when Simon was 5 and Sarah was 4 and Sam was 2, the family sat together on the porch of the big house watching the sunset over the prairie. The children were playing with a puppy Samuel had brought home, and Rose was sitting in one of the rocking chairs, Samuel's hand in hers. "Do you ever think about that day at the train station?" Samuel asked quietly. "When I first saw you standing there with that little carpet bag, looking like you expected the world to swallow you whole?" Rose smiled, leaning her head against his shoulder. "I think about it all the time. I was so scared. I did not know what I was getting into, did not dare to hope for anything good. I was scared too," Samuel admitted. "I had never met you, had no idea if we would suit, if we could build a life together. I kept thinking about all the ways it could go wrong. And instead, everything went right," Rose said softly. She turned to look at him, this man who had given her everything, who had taken her frozen heart and taught it to love. You gave me warmth, Samuel. Not just a warm house, though you did that too. You gave me warmth here. She placed her hand over her heart. You made me understand what home really means. It is not walls and a roof. It is this, you and me and our children. It is love. Samuel's eyes were bright with emotion, and he lifted her hand to his lips, kissing her palm. You gave me just as much, Rose. I had a house before you came, but it was not a home. It was just a place I worked and slept. You made it a home. You made everything matter more. Every sunrise is more beautiful because I get to share it with you. Every challenge is easier because we face it together. You are the best thing that ever happened to me. Rose kissed him then, long and sweet, while their children played, and the sun painted the sky in shades of gold and pink. She thought about the advertisement in the Boston Herald, about the train ticket and the leap of faith, about stepping off into the unknown. She thought about cold and loneliness and fear, and how far away those things seemed now. This was what warmth felt like. Samuel's arms around her, their children's laughter ringing out across the prairie, the solid weight of home beneath her feet. This was what love looked like, a cowboy who had promised her safety and kept that promise every day, who had taken her broken pieces and helped her put them back together, who had shown her that she was worthy of gentleness and care and devotion. The mail-order bride had never known a warm home, but the cowboy had made his home warm for her. And in doing so, he had given her everything she had never dared to dream of: a place to belong, a purpose, a family, and a love that would last all their days. Years continued to pass in a golden blur of happiness and hard work. The ranch became a landmark in the area, and Samuel's reputation as a fair and honest rancher spread throughout Oklahoma Territory. Rose became known for her kindness and her willingness to help neighbors in need, whether it was nursing someone through illness or simply providing a listening ear. The children of the homestead grew healthy and strong, learning the value of hard work and the importance of family. In 1901, Rose gave birth to twin girls, Anna and Emma, and the house erupted in delighted chaos. Samuel hired more help for the ranch, so he could spend more time with his expanding family, and he had to add another room to the house to accommodate everyone. Rose sometimes stood in the doorway and looked at her 5 children playing together, and she would feel that familiar tightness in her throat, that overwhelming gratitude for a life she had never expected. Simon, now 7, took his role as oldest seriously, watching out for his younger siblings and helping his father with the ranch work. Sarah, at 6, had become Rose's shadow in the kitchen, learning to cook and bake with careful concentration. Sam, at 4, was the family comedian, always doing something to make everyone laugh, and the twins, identical in every way except that Anna had a small birthmark on her left shoulder, were adored by everyone. The community around Enid continued to grow and prosper. The raw settlement that Rose had first seen in 1893 had become a real town, with schools and churches and shops. Samuel and Rose were pillars of the community, known for their generosity and their strong marriage. Other mail-order brides would sometimes come to Rose for advice, and she would share her story, always emphasizing the importance of patience and trust and giving love time to grow. Mrs. Patterson remained a close friend, and the two families visited often. Rose had never had a friend before, had never known the comfort of female companionship, and she treasured the relationship. Mrs. Patterson's children were older now, some of them married with children of their own, and Rose looked forward to the day when her own children would give her grandchildren. In 1903, Oklahoma Territory was booming, and Samuel decided to invest in improving the ranch further. He built a new barn, larger and more modern, and he fenced more of the property. He bought a bull from Texas to improve the cattle stock, and he acquired several fine mares with the goal of breeding quality horses. Rose supported all his decisions, managing the household finances with the same careful attention she brought to everything else. That summer, a photographer came through town, and Samuel insisted they have a family portrait made. Rose protested, saying she was too plain, but Samuel would not hear of it. He bought her a new dress for the occasion, a beautiful dark green that matched her eyes, and he hired the photographer to come to the ranch. The resulting photograph showed Samuel and Rose seated with their 5 children arranged around them. Everyone was dressed in their Sunday best, and though Rose looked serious in the picture because the photographer told her not to smile, her eyes shone with happiness. Samuel had the photograph framed and hung it in the parlor, and he would often stop to look at it, a small smile on his face. "My family," he would say, and the pride and love in his voice never failed to make Rose's heart full. The children continued to grow and thrive. Simon showed a real talent for working with horses and began helping his father with the training. Sarah developed a love of reading and would spend hours with the books Samuel bought from the catalog, devouring every story. Sam was mechanically minded, always taking things apart to see how they worked and usually able to put them back together. Anna and Emma were inseparable, creating their own twin language and often finishing each other's sentences. Rose taught all the children at home, as the schoolhouse in town was too far for them to walk every day. She used the books she had loved as a child, the primers the kind teacher had given her, and she made sure each child could read and write and do mathematics. Samuel would help with lessons when he could, and he made sure the children understood the practical aspects of running a ranch, from animal husbandry to crop rotation to bookkeeping. In 1905, when Oklahoma was preparing for statehood, Samuel was asked to serve on a committee to represent the ranching interests of the region. It meant trips to the territorial capital and meetings with politicians and businessmen, and Rose went with him whenever she could. She was quiet at these gatherings, still not entirely comfortable in crowds, but Samuel always introduced her with pride, making sure everyone knew that she was his partner in every sense of the word. Statehood came in 1907, and the entire territory celebrated. Samuel and Rose brought the children to a large gathering in town, and they watched fireworks light up the night sky while patriotic speeches echoed across the crowd. Simon was 13 now, tall and lanky, already showing signs of the man he would become. Sarah was 12, poised and thoughtful. Sam was 10, full of energy and curiosity. The twins were 6, adorable and mischievous in equal measure. "Can you believe how much has changed?" Samuel said to Rose as they watched their children run and play with other youngsters. "When we came here, this was all raw prairie. Now look at it. A state, a real community, schools and churches and roads. We helped build it," Rose said softly. "All of us who took the chance and came west. We made something out of nothing." Samuel pulled her close, and Rose leaned into his warmth, a warmth that had never faded even after 14 years of marriage. "I could not have done any of it without you," he said. "You are my foundation, Rose. Everything I have built, I built on the strength you gave me." Rose smiled up at him. "We built it together. That is what makes it strong." The years continued their steady march. The children grew toward adulthood, each developing their own personality and dreams. Simon talked about expanding the ranch someday, about breeding horses that would be known throughout the Southwest. Sarah wanted to be a teacher to help children the way Rose's teacher had helped her. Sam dreamed of the new automobiles he had seen in catalogs, wondering if someday they would replace horses. Anna wanted to be a doctor, inspired by the physician who had helped deliver the twins. Emma wanted to travel, to see the ocean and the mountains and everything beyond the prairie. Rose and Samuel encouraged all of these dreams, saving money for educations and opportunities. They wanted their children to have choices, to be able to pursue their passions rather than just survive as Rose had done for so much of her early life. In 1910, Simon fell in love with a girl from town, the daughter of the banker, and Samuel and Rose watched with joy and a touch of bittersweet sadness as their oldest son courted and then married. The wedding was held at the ranch, with the whole community invited, and Rose cried through the entire ceremony. Samuel held her hand and whispered that it was all right. This was the natural order of things, and they would have grandchildren before they knew it. He was right. Simon and his wife gave them a grandson in 1911, a beautiful baby boy they named after Samuel. Rose held her first grandchild and marveled at the circle of life, at how she had gone from a girl who had nothing to a grandmother with everything. The years brought other changes as well. The ranch continued to prosper, and Samuel began to slow down a bit, letting Simon take on more of the daily operations. Rose's hair turned silver, and Samuel told her she was more beautiful than ever. They celebrated their 20th anniversary in 1913, and Samuel gave Rose a locket with photographs of all 5 children inside. Rose gave him a watch with an inscription on the back. "To my heart's home, all my love, Rose." They were in their 40s now, no longer young but not yet old, settled into a comfortable rhythm that came from decades of partnership. They still held hands while sitting on the porch in the evenings. Samuel still told Rose he loved her every single day. They still made each other laugh, still supported each other through challenges, still found joy in the simple act of being together. Sarah became a teacher, just as she had dreamed, taking a position at the schoolhouse in town. Sam surprised everyone by showing an aptitude for business and began helping Samuel with the financial side of the ranch, making investments that expanded their holdings. The twins went away to a finishing school in Kansas City for a year, but came back eager to return to the ranch, declaring that city life was not for them. More grandchildren came, each one welcomed with joy and celebration. The big house that Samuel had built echoed with the sound of young voices again, and Rose found herself teaching a new generation to read and cook and understand that love was the foundation of everything. In 1918, when the Great War ended and the world began to heal, Samuel and Rose celebrated their 25th anniversary. All 5 of their children were there, along with grandchildren and friends and neighbors. There was music and dancing, laughter and tears, and speeches about the couple who had built something beautiful out of faith and hard work and love. Samuel stood up at the end of the evening and pulled Rose to her feet beside him. 25 years ago, he said, his voice carrying across the gathered crowd, I placed an advertisement in a Boston newspaper. I was lonely, and I was looking for a partner to help me build a life. What I got was so much more than I ever dreamed. Rose came to me broken by life, expecting nothing but hardship. And somehow, despite everything she had been through, she gave me her trust. She gave me her heart. She gave me this family, this life, this home. Every good thing I have, I owe to her. He turned to Rose, and his eyes were as full of love as they had been on their wedding day. Rose, you are my heart. You are my home. You made everything warm, everything bright, everything worth fighting for. I love you more today than I did when we started, and I will love you more tomorrow than I do today. Thank you for taking a chance on a lonely cowboy. Thank you for building this life with me. Thank you for being mine. Rose could not speak past the lump in her throat, so she simply kissed him, right there in front of everyone, and the gathered crowd cheered and applauded. When they finally pulled apart, Rose managed to whisper, "Thank you for giving me warmth. Thank you for teaching me what home means. Thank you for loving me when I did not know how to love myself. You are everything to me, Samuel. Everything." The years that followed brought the usual mix of joy and sorrow. Parents passed away. Children faced challenges. The world changed in ways both wonderful and difficult. But through it all, Samuel and Rose remained each other's constant, the foundation upon which everything else was built. They grew old together, their bodies slowing, but their love never dimming. They sat on the porch and watched the sun set over the prairie, holding hands and remembering all the years they had shared. They told stories to their grandchildren about the early days, about the first winter storm and the outlaws, and the hard work of building a ranch from nothing. They talked about the advertisement in the newspaper and the train ticket and the leap of faith that had changed both their lives forever. In 1930, On a golden October afternoon, much like the one when Rose had first arrived in Enid, Samuel and Rose sat together in the rocking chairs on the porch of the big house. They were both in their 60s now, their hair white, their faces lined with the years of sun and wind and laughter. The ranch spread out before them, prosperous and beautiful, a testament to decades of hard work. Their children were all married with families of their own, and grandchildren played in the yard, their voices carrying on the autumn breeze. "Do you remember the first time we sat on a porch together?" Samuel asked, his hand warm in Rose's. "After I picked you up from the train station and you looked like you might bolt at any second?" Rose laughed, the sound still bright and warm after all these years. "I was terrified. I kept waiting for you to show your true colors, to become cruel or demanding. I could not believe that anyone could be as kind as you seem to be." "And now?" Samuel asked, turning to look at her with those blue-green eyes that still made her heart skip. "Now I know that your kindness was real, that it never faded, not through all the hard years and the challenges and the changes. You kept your promise, Samuel. You said I would never be cold or hungry as long as you had breath in your body, and you have kept that promise every single day for 37 years. Samuel lifted her hand to his lips, kissing it gently. "It was the easiest promise I ever made. Loving you, Rose, has been the joy of my life. You took a house and made it a home. You took a lonely man and gave him a family. You took my dreams and made them bigger and better than I ever imagined they could be." Rose felt tears slip down her cheeks, but they were happy tears, grateful tears. "I never knew what warmth felt like before I met you. I thought it was just about being physically warm, having enough to eat and a roof overhead. But you taught me that real warmth comes from love, from being seen and valued and cherished, from having someone to share the burdens and multiply the joys. You made your home warm for me, Samuel, and in doing so, you healed wounds I did not even know I had." They sat in comfortable silence then, watching their grandchildren play, watching the sun paint the sky in shades of gold and pink and purple. The prairie stretched out before them, endless and beautiful, and Rose thought about how far she had come from that frightened girl on the train platform. She had never known a warm home before Samuel, but he had given her so much more than warmth. He had given her love and safety and purpose. He had given her a family and a legacy. He had given her a life worth living. As the sun set on that golden October evening, Rose leaned her head on Samuel's shoulder and felt his arm come around her, steady and sure. This was home. Not the house, though it was beautiful. Not the land, though it was prosperous. Home was this man beside her, this love that had sustained them through all the years and all the changes. Home was warmth, and warmth was love, and love was Samuel. The mail-order bride had never known a warm home, but the cowboy had made his home warm for her. And together, they had created something that would last for generations, a legacy of love, a testament to the power of trust and faith and commitment. They had built a life out of nothing but hope and hard work, and it had been more beautiful than either of them had ever dared to dream. As twilight deepened and the first stars began to appear in the vast Oklahoma sky, Samuel whispered, "I love you, Rose. Today and always." And Rose whispered back, "I love you too. Forever and always." It was everything she had never known she needed, everything she had never dared to hope for. It was warmth and home and love, all wrapped up in the arms of a cowboy who had kept every promise he had ever made. And it was perfect.